All right, let's get to the game. Jules, I suppose you were impressed by the first half. I mean, it's easy when you score that early in the game, right?
Yeah, of course. Great goal by Toni Kroos, a bit like in the Barca game as well with the early Vidal goal. I thought they controlled the game really well. I thought Benzema played well. I thought it was interesting, Sid, that Zidane went with the old guard, very much with Marcelo at left back, when you thought that Mendy maybe had overtaken him in the Soviet hierarchy at left back.
No Valverde.
That Modric started as well, and maybe it was a case of Zidane thinking, do you know what, let's make sure that we get this one. We're 5 points behind now because Barca had won. And by the way, Sid, I'll ask you after about the schedule and why Barca are always playing before Real Madrid for the next 3 or 4 games. But anyway, maybe Zidane thought, you know what, I'm going to put the most experienced, safer hands or safer foot and not take any risks and put them and then make a lot of changes at half time or after an hour when we in the lead clearly, and that's what he did. So I thought it was good. I thought they were very much in control.
It's a curious one, isn't it? Because actually Real Madrid only had 6 shots in the entire game, which really isn't many. In fact, it's their lowest figure all year. And yet I'm with you on this. Certainly at half time, I felt like Madrid were very impressive, absolutely in control, had no sense at all that this game could slip them by. I thought in terms of their movement, the quality of the way that they played, I think it was one of the best first halves I've seen this season. Although obviously, again, decontextualized, it's very difficult to judge that properly. And I think while they were actually quite poor in the second half, and you know, Eibar got one back, could easily have got a second, hit the crossbar, had a very good chance for Pedro Leon. I think that was a product of the realization that this game is done. And I think that's reflected in the fact that they made so many changes. And I think we'll see Madrid and Barcelona do this wherever they possibly can, which isn't always, of course, because there'll be games when they can't. But if they get into a lead, we will see whole-scale changes all the way through the team. To the extent that I'm really surprised yet again yesterday that one of those changes wasn't Casemiro. I mean, Casemiro could have been taken off. He could also have been sent off, but then we know that with Casemiro, he has this magical ability to avoid the second yellow card. It's he wears this cloak of invisibility, which is quite extraordinary. And
you reckon he'll take that cloak with him when he leaves Real Madrid? And like, let's say, you know, if he played for Getafe, would he still have that same cloak? Or would he have to leave it behind? When
I'm more worried about whether he has this in real life. You know, does he break a red light and not get I mean, he's the one player that hasn't got a replacement. So I was quite surprised that he wasn't one of those replaced. I think you're right. I think Zidane probably did play safe, although in a way, you'd say, is it safe to not play Fede Valverde when he's been possibly their outstanding player this season with Casemiro? And so maybe that's not quite safe. But I think we'll see this, and I think we'll see mass rotations. You're talking about the goal, by the way. So I looked this up. So Barcelona scored after 65 seconds. Real Madrid scored after 182 seconds. You know, between them, it didn't even take 5 minutes for them both to score. And after that, the game was comfortable. I don't know whether this is a sign of things to come with these two teams winning relatively comfortably, but I feel like it might be.
I want to ask you about Marcelo because look, I love watching him play. He doesn't play for the teams I support, so maybe that's part of the reason I don't get bent out of shape by supposed defensive shortcomings. I thought he scored a great goal. Is Ferland Mendy still, you think, the first choice?
Well, I mean,
in Zidane's eyes.
I mean, he wasn't yesterday, but I think, you know what, I think I would probably slightly repackage it in terms of the answer, in so much as I don't necessarily think it's that Mendy is the first choice, as that I think that Mendy is the first choice in those games where Zidane thinks that defending is more important than attacking. And I know that's a fairly simplistic answer, and in a way you would say, well, that means all the big games it's Mendy. I would say not necessarily. I think some of the big games at home, he might still go with Marcelo. I think big games in which he doesn't necessarily see a direct attacking threat on the right-hand side going right at Marcelo, I think it might still be Marcelo. Because there's no doubt Marcelo is a wonderful footballer, I think, who just happens to be a left-back. I don't think he really is a left-back as such. I also think it's true that the last couple of years his form has plummeted a very, very long way. But I think we went through a spell of 3 or 4 years where he was defensively quite reliable as well. Admittedly, as I say, that looks like it's phased out. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think in the really big games against the stronger attacking teams, yes, I think Mendy starts.
Marcelo scored. Eden Hazard didn't score, but gave an assist to Sergio Ramos on the second goal. Do you think he looked sharp, I have to say, for someone who hasn't played for so long. Do you think he's getting close to being back to his best? And do you think we will see a great Hazard for the weeks to come?
Well,
we
obviously,
saw. Well, Hazard played well on his debut for Real Madrid. He seems to as well, didn't he? And then before people realized he was a bit chunky. So,
and he admitted that he was a bit chunky, and then of course he had a couple of injuries, and he had a little when he came back to fitness. When was that? Oof, my mind's gone, but I think it was just after Christmas or just before Christmas. He came back to fitness. No, it must have been just before Christmas because then he missed the Club World Cup, didn't he? So he came back and he played really, really well for 2 or 3 games. You feel, wow, there's a real player here, and then obviously had the fitness worries. I mean, is he back to his best? Who knows? It's one game. But what Madrid have said, and I'm always a little cautious about the kind of things that get said, particularly when you see that they get said by a whole load of newspapers on the same day, and it starts to feel like this has been a deliberate attempt to kind of, express this message, is that he's looked really good in training, that he's looked sharp, he's looked fit, and he's looked slim as well. Yesterday, I thought he was very, very good indeed, but, it is against Eibar in these sort of such strange circumstances. We probably need to see more of it. And I guess as well, there might be an emotional component to this, which is that he's been given a second chance that he probably didn't think he'd have after a season where, truth be told, he was probably, just before lockdown started, probably looking at this and thinking, almost no matter what happens now between now and the end of the season, given that he was likely to play very little if he played at all, and I think he probably would have come back to fitness, I'm probably going to be looking at my first season at Real Madrid as a failure. He now comes back, and I've said this lots of times, but I think it's worth stressing again, with 3 rounds of the Champions League still to go, the rounds that everyone focuses on, and 11 games in La Liga still to go, having been given a second chance. So he has the opportunity now to make it so that in 6 weeks' time or 9 weeks' time, once the European and domestic competition is over, we look back on this and say, yeah, Eden Hazard was bloody brilliant.
Marcelo took a knee after a goal. I mean, Jules and I talked about this earlier on the show. Can you just talk a little bit about, here in England, we have a situation, and I've got pretty strong views on this, that the Premier League has decided, okay, well, we're going to show our support as a league for Black Lives Matter by printing Black Lives Matter on the back of people's shirts, which to me it doesn't sit too well, because it's a little bit like the poppy. When something's printed on your shirt, you're not making an individual decision. But I want to ask you, Sid, how is Marcelo's celebration? I mean, how is that taken in general in Spain? And is there a sense that maybe some of the players who aren't aren't black or aren't of mixed race descent maybe might want to join in? Or
I honestly don't know the answer to whether or not there's a sense that other players want to join in. I think I kind of take your point about the league thing as well, in the sense that I feel like this is something that players have to decide for themselves, and also that players I think have to decide for themselves, if you like, with the backing, the support, or if you like, the invitation of teammates. So it may well be that white players who feel like supporting this cause may feel some desire to ask black teammates whether this is appropriate, whether they, because they may feel that they don't want to, if you like, appropriate this for themselves, but at the same time feel like they do want to support it, but don't want to support it on their own terms, and want to be sure that this is something that's kind of supported by teammates. I honestly don't know what the rest of Spain thinks about this. It was a celebration yesterday that the TV cameras didn't focus on for very long. It happened so quick that I wasn't completely sure he'd done it at first. The TV camera cut away from him to something else. Now, I don't think that's an issue, by the way. I don't think that was deliberately done to hide it. I think it's just the nature of TV direction in Spain. And so, but then the league themselves did publish on its social media a picture of this. The league has said that they support this, but it hasn't had the kind of, if you like, an institutional backing. It's on the front cover of AS today, but it's on the front cover of AS in part because it allows them to do a Real Madrid headline that kind of, helps about, the idea that Madrid are back, rather than necessarily a headline specifically about the celebration itself. I think it's been seen as a positive here, but it's not been seen as something, as yet at least, that's created a huge amount of conversation.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.